Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, of course, thank you so much for being here today. Simple, straightforward, and fun topic. Let's go for it. What's the craziest thing that ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Was going to see a concert with some friends. Printed my ticket at home. This was before mobile tickets were ubiquitous. We all decided to meet at a bar about a mile from the venue, then walk over after a few drinks. Have our drinks and some food and head to the venue. When we get there, I suddenly realize I don't have my ticket on me. Panicked, I run back to the bar, check my car in the parking lot, nothing. Head inside the bar, check the table we were at, and look everywhere. No ticket. Bummed and dejected, I leave the bar and begin to trek back to the venue to let my friends know I can't go with them. While I was waiting at a crosswalk, the wind blows a bit, and with it, a sheet of paper floats past me and comes to a stop on the sidewalk. I reach down, pick it up, and it's my goddamn printed ticket. One of the best days of my life. I'm a medic and firefighter. We once had a call for something normal, like chest pain or something. I can't remember. The caller said he was in his barn or garage, which isn't weird really around here. Anyway, we pull up on the scene, and something just felt off. No idea why, but something just told me in my gut that something was wrong. I decided to do a 360 around the building before we went through the door, and at the front, that was clearly the entrance. I walk around and come to a window on the side of the building and look in. There was a shotgun rigged to the door. The guy had set a booby trap for us, and he had hung himself as well. We kicked in this plexiglass type material on the side of the building and entered that way. Guy was dead. Nothing we could do about it at that point. I would have been the first through the door. No idea why I didn't just walk through in that day. Have a $2 bill that has me and my wife's signature on it saying just the two of us. We did it when we first got together, and after a while had it framed. Some years later, it was stolen by some jackass who decided to break into my house. I ended up going to some random gas station weeks later and got it back as change. Literally just stood there and stared at it in disbelief and told the cashier about it. Just insane coincidence and luck. Still have that sucker, and it's been another 5 years. I moved away from home when I was 20. I started working for a company that had several locations around the city. One day I just happened to be walking past one of the locations that I didn't work at because I was going to an eye appointment. Right as I was walking by, a guy I knew from the other location walks out the door and tells me that my mom is on the phone. She was desperately trying to get in touch with me because my grandfather had died. She knew the name of the company I worked for but didn't know which location I worked at. So she got an operator to connect her with one of the locations at random. The guy I knew said he was on the phone with her and was just starting to explain that I didn't work at that location when he looked out the window and saw me walking by. I, American, was visiting the UK for the first time. I got to my hostel and started chatting with the Australian guy in the bed above mine. When I mentioned where I'm from, he says that there's a famous restaurant that he really loves and goes to with his family every time they visit. Turns out, it was a place I used to work. He says, "Hey, I have a picture of our server from the last time I was there. Maybe it's someone you know." It was me. I have a kind of similar story in the sense that a good friend of mine was in Los Angeles and she was going to a bar, handed her ID to the bouncer, and the bouncer was like, "Hey, do you know?" and said my name. And she was like, "Yeah, I went to high school with him." He's like, "Oh my God, I've known him forever. As a matter of fact," and he reaches into his back pocket and pulls out a book of photographs that he had developed. And they were like 4 pictures of me. I hadn't seen that guy in 15 years. Small world. Was going from Rio de Janeiro to Paris with my aunt and cousins. The day before we were supposed to fly, we changed our flight to the following day so someone could pick us up at the airport when we arrived. Our original flight was the Air France 447 that fell in 2009 and everyone died. I was at a stoplight in a convertible and a taxi cab came hurtling in my direction at over 100 miles per hour. He thought his brakes failed, but he was actually pounding the accelerator. He went into a ditch as he approached me, and it sent him airborne. He scraped along the side of me. His tires left a mark at about my elbow level. His bumper grazed my head, and he flipped 3 times and crashed into the truck in front of me. His bumper removed a mole on the back of my head, and I had a massive concussion that kept me in the hospital for a week, but I was otherwise unhurt. Incredible car accident. I played poker once with Chris O'Donnell in a skeevy riverboat casino in Illinois. I got dealt a straight flush and won $5,000 instant bonus for it. It was an otherwise low-stakes table. The worst part is that I had no clue who Chris O'Donnell was. When you hit a bonus like that, they close the table for a few minutes to review the video and make sure you didn't pop an ace out of your sleeve. Chris left the table, and immediately everybody started talking about him and completely ignored my gorgeous straight flush that was still sitting on the table. Oh well, I got paid. Still the only time to this day I've won any kind of remotely material amount in a casino. I was on a plane with a wanted terrorist. I was seated 5 rows ahead of Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber on the flight to Dubai. The doors were closed, and we never left the gate, and the captain kept making announcements or excuses as to why we were delayed. After nearly 3 hours of sitting there, the federal agents rushed the plane and marched that little shit off the plane. I had a beater car in college. It was an ancient Plymouth made mostly out of duct tape and rust. I had all of my college books in it, just kept it there. Easier for studying. Go out to my car and grab what I need. Engineering books too, so super expensive. Someone stole my car out of my driveway with all my books in it. Police report, all that. No joy. I was heartbroken. How in the world could I do my homework? How could I continue the semester? I was totally effed. My mom offered to take me to school that day. I was just ruined. I had no hope. No idea how I would get by. And on an on-ramp on the way to school, there she sat. I just happened to notice her as we were driving by. The old girl chose the exact moment to throw her transmission, when the thief was out joyriding it around and tried to get it on the freeway, and I just happened to notice it sitting there. All my books were still in it. You just don't get that kind of loyalty with a car anymore. She sacrificed herself in just the right spot so I'd see her and get my books back. I'll always love that car. Godspeed, you old boat. When I was a kid, I sleepwalked really badly and would also sometimes quasi-sleepwalk where I was aware and would remember it later, but would be out of my effing mind confused and semi-dreaming while it happened. I woke up in the middle of the night one night at 7 or 8 years old, and there was apparently a power outage because it was pitch black in my room, no nightlight, and no light coming in my window from the streetlights. I wanted to leave my room and go wake up my parents because I was freaked out about the dark, but got disoriented and confused. My closet door with my bedroom door, and started panicking because I thought someone stacked a bunch of shit outside my bedroom door to trap me. Started throwing shit out of my closet and got to the back wall. Now, my childhood home had a dormer style upstairs added before we lived there, such that my bedroom was on the same level as the attic over the original house area. There was an access panel to the attic in my closet, and I somehow managed to get that open and escaped my room into the attic. Around that time, I fully woke up the rest of the way to full lucid consciousness and freaked the F out, not knowing where I was and surrounded by dusty-ass boxes and spider webs, and started screaming my effing brains out. Turns out, the part of the attic I was in was directly over my parents' bedroom, and I scared the shit out of them because my screaming was coming from their ceiling. They started freaking out, and I was in there screaming for a solid 5 minutes before my parents were able to figure out what happened and rescue me. I'm 36 years old now, and still have the occasional nightmare about waking up in the attic. Was one of the main victims of a terrorist attack a few years ago. It was an American who was inspired by ISIS and set off a few pressure cooker bombs in New York City. Luckily, only lost some teeth and were able to get them replaced, but took about a year's worth of surgery due to the damage to my gums. Was super lucky the pellets that shot out of the bomb mainly hit my teeth and lips versus my eyes or anywhere else more serious. I went for a routine goiter removal surgery. The surgeon only removed my right side of the thyroid because he said I was young enough and didn't want me to take thyroid meds for the rest of my life. At the post-op appointment, the biopsy came back and it's cancer. The surgeon immediately scheduled surgery to remove the other side of the thyroid. Post-op of that surgery showed a different cancer growing. I basically had 2 surgeries within 8 days and 2 different cancers at the same time. Due to the trauma of surgeries and radiation treatments, my vocal cords became paralyzed. I had to go to speech therapy for almost 9 months to learn how to speak and swallow again. The ironic thing is, I had a biopsy done about 6 weeks before the goiter surgery. The doctor took multiple samples at different levels of my thyroid. Apparently, she missed both cancers. If it had been caught in the biopsy, I wouldn't need multiple surgeries, which led to the trauma, voice loss, trouble swallowing, etc. In 2013, I received a notice from my college that my low GPA from the previous semester made me ineligible for financial aid the following semester. It was my last term in grad school, and the college was threatening to drop me from all classes if I didn't pay tuition within 72 hours. I went to drown my sorrows at a bar later that night. I met a stranger and was started talking. I told her my story, and she offered to pay my tuition. I told her I didn't accept loans from strangers, but she said it was a gift. Turns out she was a very wealthy CEO, and that night she wrote me a check for $2,500. I paid my tuition, finished school, and we still keep in touch. I wonder how much that tuition would be today. Also, I'm not going to get into it, but I have some issues with what college charge and what you get from it, but happy to debate it down in the comments. My biological father, who I had never met and lost track of my mom's contact info, found me on MySpace out of the blue. We met in real life, kept up with visits, letters, emails for 14 years, and he got to meet his grandchildren. He and my parents had a great relationship too, and would hang out together. I lost him in March. I can't believe he found me, but more importantly, I can't believe I got 14 years to spend with him. I was in a coffee shop in Austria called The Pharmacy. I asked for the toilet, and the old man behind the counter told me to go downstairs and to use the door that said "Do not enter." I done what I was told, but I found I was trapped in the dark in some storage room. Fearing it was a Fritzl room, I switched on my phone light and noticed a ladder, so I climbed up it. At the top, I exited a hatch and was surrounded by horses, very expensive-looking horses. I'd come up in the stables of the Vienna Spanish riding school, had to exit through the riding ring. I was kidnapped for about 8 months as a child. I remember it pretty vividly. It was my grandma on my dad's side of the family, and my dad, but it was because my grandma wanted me. I remember when it happened. My dad picked me up early from school. We spent the whole day and night driving, spent the night in a motel, and grandma got me the next day. My grandma's half Mexican, so that's where we went. I knew something was wrong when my dad picked me up. My grandma had a bunch of weird rules as well. I was more like a doll to her than a child. She also specifically didn't teach me Spanish, so I couldn't communicate what was happening with anyone. One of the most effed up things was my mom actually came to Mexico to talk to my grandma about me. My grandma, being the manipulative bitch, invited her. I was babysat by a neighbor and locked in a room. I remember banging on the window and door, trying to get to my mom. Because I could see her from the window, just ended up getting my ass whooped. I had the lower bunk of a set of bunk beds. I was about 3 or 4 years old at the time, and I woke up and ran to my parents' room just minutes before the top bunk smashed down on my lower bunk. We all ran in and found my older sister sitting up on the upper bunk as it lay on my lower bunk, crying but otherwise fine. I don't know that it could have killed me. I kind of doubt it would have been that bad, but it definitely would have hurt me if I'd still been there when it crashed. I got into a massive car wreck with the owner of the company I worked for, broke my neck and left wrist. 2 months later, my dad killed himself. The owner made me use my vacation days to mourn my dad, so I sued him for getting us into a wreck. Ended up getting an insane amount of money. Quit my job, sold my house for double what I paid for it. Been living in a travel trailer, seeing America ever since. As I walked into a high school hockey game, I had a strong premonition I would be hit with a hockey puck while sitting in the stands. I told all my friends, who very much laughed and gave me shit. I asked them to choose our seats, which ended up pretty far away at centerish ice. They made fun of me all game until halfway through the second, when a puck comes screaming off the ice and hits me square in the chest, falling flat into my open hands. We never talked about it much after that, and no, I do not think I'm psychic. It was just the first craziest thing that happened to me that popped in my head. I still have the puck 30 years later. Yet you ignored that gut feeling and took a hockey puck to almost your gut. Could you have waited outside, or would it not have mattered wherever you were? You were destined to get hit with a hockey puck that night. I had an ear infection that was misdiagnosed for years, from when I was about 25 to 33. During that timeline, it spread out of my ear and into the surrounding bone. Then, due to the atypical bone formation in my skull that would have otherwise been asymptomatic, the infection traveled up my skull and into my cranial cavity, unbeknownst to me. The symptoms I experienced were only in my ear, where I felt fluid and pressure. I finally demanded that an ENT place a tube to try and clear out the infection. The tube drained for about 3 weeks, and finally the ENT I had gone to panicked and misdiagnosed me with a cerebrospinal fluid leak. He rushed me to the ER without even testing the fluid, and he intended to cut my skull open to look for a cerebrospinal fluid leak that didn't exist. I was in the ER on the table with the doctors running pre-op antibiotics when I got a call from a friend of the family who's a doctor. He had been speaking to his doctor friends, and they all agreed I needed to get the F out of there. They didn't believe there was a CSF leak at all. I told the team of doctors who had assembled to operate on me that I was leaving, and they were pissed. They all shot me condescending and angry looks as I left. I got a call 2 days later from the ENT telling me that they got the analysis of the fluid back, and it wasn't cerebrospinal fluid. I was in shock. They were going to slice my head open on a fishing expedition for a CSF leak that didn't exist. He didn't apologize or anything. I hung up the phone and never talked to him again. Eventually, the team of neurosurgeons my friend knew diagnosed me with a runaway ear infection. One told me that I have the most unique-looking skull he'd ever seen, some compliment. One showed me a CT of my skull. See this black spot inside your skull? That's air. That's not supposed to be there. And it means there's a channel from the outside world to the inside of your skull. That's very bad. Do you ever fly? I responded that yes, I fly all the time. For work, for pleasure, all the time. Well, stop that immediately. This is very dangerous. Every time you've flown over the last several years, you've been rolling a die. It's possible that when the cabin pressurized, this air pocket would expand and create a midline shift in your brain, and you'd die immediately. So, after a shitload more scans, they took me in for an 8-hour surgery. They removed all of the infected bone in my skull, a piece that ran by 2 by 6. In its place, they put a titanium mesh implant to hold my skull together. The recovery was the weirdest and most disorienting experience. When I turned my head, I could feel the plate shifting, and my skull was no longer a full circle, so it wasn't structurally sound, so it too kind of shifted. But the bone healed over the implant, and now you'd never know that any of this had happened, except for a barely noticeable scar behind my left ear. Thank God I had that friend to tell me to bolt from that emergency room.